Hello, my name is Tony. So what possessed me? Well, it wasn't the devil, I don't think. Christopher Therault posted a comment about my video review of Blood on Satan's Claw and mentioned the Devil's Nightmare and its star Erica Blanc, which acted as a catalyst sparking memories of the film and the circumstances surrounding my seeing it way back when. Now, as I'm trying in some small way to make this channel as much about anyone who watches and comments or subscribes as anything else, I started thinking. Not my strong suit, but anyway, thinking it was, or something like it. You know, you never really forget anything, right? And very often, all it takes is a word, a phrase, an image, a sound, some trigger to bring something rushing back to the forefront of your mind. That mere reference to the Devil's Nightmare had this effect on me. And all of a sudden, it was like the time I couldn't stop that apocalyptically evil Boney M song, Brown Girl in the Ring, echoing and repeating endlessly in my brain on a mind-meltingly hideous loop of madness-inducing sonic horror. Just as in that case, I knew I had to perform a psychological exorcism to get rid of it. The only way to vanquish fear is to first face up to it. Personally, I usually prefer avoidance and suppression as my weapons of choice. But as my granddaughter, who's 2.5, often says to me,
"Be brave, Granddad, be brave."
Who am I to not listen to and act upon the sagely advice of someone who isn't yet 3 years old? Like that time she said,
"Then I tried, Granddad."
Anyway, forget about that. Let's get this show on the road. Flo, take your hands off the wheel, sweetie.
Sorry, Granddad.
Another cold, rainy, early 1970s Sunday night in the town that was shit out of God's arsehole as a wet cosmic fart following the rapid consumption by the Almighty of a meteor and comet-spiced black hole Vindaloo. A double feature, a main attraction and support act. 2 horror flicks, X-rated. That's what's on, and that's what I'm going to see. And I do. I most certainly do. I didn't know anything about these films at the time, just titles in a poster cassette. But now things are different. So let me fill you in the nicest possible way, missus. Disciple of Death, the main attraction. Christ on a crutch. Was the final film to feature Mike Raven. Raven, real name Austin Churton Fairman, wonder why he changed it. Was, deep breath, a BBC radio disc jockey in the 60s, actor, sculptor, sheep farmer, writer, TV presenter, producer, ballet dancer, flamenco guitarist and photographer. What's the rest of that saying, jack of all trades? Well, that's the bit that applies most relevantly here. Raven quit being a DJ to go into acting. How did he fare? Depends on your idea of acting. If it's one that involves frozen scowling fixedly and doomily into the camera, moving around as though rigor mortis has set in whilst you're still alive, speaking in a deep monotonous baritone, and projecting all the conviction and emotional depth of an anthracite toilet brush, then he fared very fucking well indeed. He had an interest in the occult, because of course he did, and appeared in 4 horror films. He was Count Karnstein in Hammer's Lust for a Vampire. They overdubbed his voice, he had a distracting lisp. Then he appeared in I, Monster for Amicus, where he was given 3rd billing just below Chris Lee and Peter Cushing. Next, he personally funded some of the budget for Crucible of Terror, in which he took the lead role of a wacko sculptor. Are there any other sort? It was filmed mostly in Cornwall. Despite it being dreadful, not Cornwall, the film, and an abject failure both financially and critically, he took it as a definite sign from beyond he should headline another production again and inflict his thespian talents on the public without delay. Thus, Disciple of Death, filmed once more in Cornwall, where Raven was living at the time, was dry heaved out upon the world. Okay, all I'm gonna say here is 2 things, one positive, the other negative, just for the sake of balance. On the positive side, Disciple of Death ended Raven's acting career, and I'm grateful to it for that. The second and negative thing, Disciple of Death is close to being the worst film I have ever seen. I came to understanding this only through seeing it, and may God have mercy on my brain. I'm not going to even try and explain what Disciple of Death is about, as there is no point. Chances are you'll never see it, but you can still find it. It's out there. There's a copy on YouTube, in fact. Yet I doubt anyone would last more than 10 minutes. And if you do, you only have yourself to blame. Don't come crying to me when it saddles you with suicidal ideation or a burning desire to plaster your head in honey-glazed superglue and plunge it into a wasp's nest. You have been warned. Do drugs by all means, but don't do Disciple of Death. It's bad for you. The Devil's Nightmare should have been the main feature on this bill. It's far from brilliant, but it does have some redemptive qualities, and looks like it was made by people who had a vague, tenuous inkling of what they were doing and how they were going to do it. Nothing about it functions in any coherent way, but at least the thought was there, I think. It's a Belgian horror movie. Belgium had a film industry? When did that happen? It stars sexy cult Italian actress Erica Blanc. It's directed by a Belgian, Jean Brismy, whose last film it was after a very brief directorial career that included some amazing films I've never heard of or seen and never will. The music is provided by Alessandro Alessandroni, who puckered up and whistled on the soundtracks of Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West and A Fistful of Dynamite. He also composed the score for the Anita Ekberg exploitation sleazathon The Killer Nun in 1979. What a legend! Cinematography is handled by André Gophers, and it's the only thing he did of any note as far as I can tell. The original print I saw was dubbed into English, and so is the Blu-ray version. I have no idea if it accurately mirrors the dialogue as it was in the original language. Suffice to say, well, hang on though, before I start getting too critical, let's whip through a synopsis and then address the devil in the details. See what I did there? Nifty, eh? The film kicks off with black and white footage of Berlin being bombed towards the end of the Second World War. The wife of a Nazi officer, Baron von Rosenberg, Jean Sauvé, dies in childbirth. Von Rosenberg is deeply concerned about the sex of the child, more so than the death of his wife, it would appear, which doesn't seem to trouble him greatly. Seemed reasonable? When he finds out the baby is a girl, he sends his Nazi officer pal, Hans Morris de Groot, and the midwife to an air raid shelter. Then he produces a long-bladed knife and in a quite unpleasant and upsetting scene, stabs the baby in its crib, killing it. Although unpleasant and upsetting and disturbing, it's not surprising, as this is the sort of thing you would normally associate with depraved Nazi scum in World War II, their shtick. But why kill his own child? Traditionally it would be someone else's. We'll find out in a bit. Fast forward to the here and now, or the there and then. A female investigative reporter is interviewing von Rosenberg at his castle about the family curse. The mention of it is about as far as it goes. She asks if she can take some pictures of the castle and the grounds. He refuses for no specified reason, but she carries on regardless, snapping away at the old wreck. The castle, not the Baron. Although it's a sunny day, a thunderstorm occurs with the sound of thunder but no clouds, lightning or rain. The reporter tries to leave in her car, but a plastic fork thing is thrown at her tyre, puncturing it with an accompanying cartoon deflation sound. She panics and runs into the woods where she falls over and looks terrified as something horrible befalls her. Her corpse is later carted off to the local village, where the doctor concludes that she died of fright, and it is noted that the mark of the devil has been branded onto her arm. A crap-looking minibus, the ultimate antithesis of luxury travel, appears with a disparate bunch of tourists on board. They're on a guided tour, I'm guessing an economy one, as their driver and guide, Ducha Christian Mallet, pays less attention to the road than the chicken portion he's stuffing into his face. The passengers include a well-heeled bickering married couple, Howard Lorenzo Turzon and Nancy Colette Emmanuel. Two very attractive younger ladies, Corinne and Regine, Ivana Novak and Shirley Corrigan, cantankerous and intolerant old git Mason Lucien Ramberg, and trainee priest Father Alvin Sorel Jacques Monceau. The gang find the road blocked, a bridge is out due to a flood. They stop to ask for local tourist and accommodation information from, holy crap, who's this fucking rube? Well, that eye-offendingly goofy-looking character at the crossroads is Satan, Daniel Emile Falk, only we don't know that yet. Old Nick advises them that the Baron of a nearby castle often does a nice bit of bed and breakfast and evening meal. There was no TripAdvisor back then, so they take his word for it and make a detour. Here's some advice. If you rock up at a creepy castle in the middle of nowhere and the front door opens on its own and then shuts on its own behind you, don't assume it's an automatic door with a hidden sensor, because it's the early 70s and castles didn't have them. Attribute it to something sinister and get the fuck out of Dodge before shit goes horribly wrong. The gang don't do that. They wander around a bit before being intercepted by Hans, who, like the Baron, survived the pulverizing of Berlin at the end of World War II. Hans has found gainful employment as the Baron's manservant. Hans is assisted by a hatchet-faced housekeeper, Martha, who wears an expression of milk-curdling disdain about everyone and everything. Hans tells the tourists they were expected after he received a phone call from an anonymous woman who provided him with all their names. No one seems to think this is odd. Rooms are already prepared. As he takes each guest to their quarters, Hans relates a story of each individual room in which one of the von Rosenberg family died a hideous death death. That's a service you don't get with Secret Escapes or Booking.com. During dinner, Martha serves and Hans delivers a delightful little organ recital which most funeral parlours would have rejected for being too sombre. The guests learn that the Baron is an alchemist. Yep, I know, just let it go for now. And that his family is cursed. Initially, I wondered if the curse wasn't being condemned to having to listen to Hans manhandle his organ repeatedly. But no, apparently the eldest daughter of every Baron is cursed to be a succubus and steal souls for the devil. Or, as I later came to know him, Mr. Bean's grandfather, who we met earlier. The Baron informs that he doesn't have a daughter. Phew, that's a relief. Things move up a gear when a flame-haired woman arrives at the castle seeking shelter. She is Lita Muller, played by Erica Blanc. Miss Blanc, a very striking and eye-catchingly gorgeous actress, resembles a slightly less well-endowed and curvaceous Raquel Welch. She has a completely knockout, deliriously sexy look, with cheekbones sharp enough to slice off a rhino's penis at 40 paces and a slight gap in her front teeth that is perversely appealing. She also has career form, having appeared in Mario Bava's Kill Baby Kill in 1966, Humberto Lenzi's So Sweet So Perverse in 1969, and Emilio Miraglia's modern gothic freakout The Night Evelyn Came Out of the Grave in 1971. Martha recognizes her and is openly hostile, yet agrees to her spending the night. Lita turns up for dinner looking like this. Got that definite wow factor going on. I've never had anyone joining me for dinner looking like that. Mine look more like Martha. So what's going on? Well, Lita is a succubus, and as Martha later admits to the student priest Alvin, her actual daughter, issuing from an illicit sexual liaison with the Baron many years previously. So she's his eldest daughter, who he is completely unaware of. There's a lot about this film that stretches belief, and someone being able to drink enough to want to shag and impregnate Martha is but one of them. Lita leads the tourists to their deaths one by one, harvesting their souls for her master the devil. When she embarks on her mission, her face changes to that of a corpse-like demon. Each of the victims is guilty of one of the 7 deadly sins. The bus driver is a glutton who never stops eating. Lita provides him with a sumptuous, seemingly endless banquet, on which he eventually chokes. Greedy bastard serves him right. Let me rephrase that. Poor tragic soul. How awful. I don't want to get cancelled by Obese Lives Matter. Fat fucks. It's absurd. I'm getting death threats from Bald Lives Matter after the Hennessy video. And I'm bald. Apparently, though, only superficially bald. The wrong sort of bald. I dunno. Where will it all end? There's a protracted lesbian lovemaking sequence between Corinne and Regine. Corinne does all the heavy lifting whilst Regine passively lies there getting all the pleasure. She's so lazy she won't even sponge her own tits in the bath. Corinne does it for her. Not that she seems to mind though. Her sloth is her undoing. When Lita introduces a lethal serpent into her room, she's too idle to wake up and outrun it. Yeah, okay. Corinne envies Nancy and covets her husband Howard. Howard lusts after Corinne. The two meet up in a spare room above Mason's where he's trying to sleep. Their sexual activity keeps him awake, incurring his wrath. He leaves his room to find and confront them. Howard and Corinne decide to move to another part of the castle, where Lita decapitates Howard with a handy guillotine and impales Corinne in an Iron Maiden. Then she tracks down Mason and throws him through a window to his death. Nancy is riddled with greed and avarice and believes the Baron has a stash of treasure hidden away somewhere, what with his being a professional alchemist and all. Yeah, they really do exist, those people who can turn base metals into gold with a cheap sparkler in a fruit bowl and some laboratory flasks of coloured liquid. What, they don't? That's right, destroy all my fucking illusions, why don't you? Anyway, Lita agrees to lead her to the treasure if they split it between them. She takes her to a room full of gold dust. Nancy falls into it and drowns. Well, that's comedy gold. We've covered gluttony, sloth, lust, envy, wrath, and avarice, which leaves the student priest and, well, must be pride then. You just know that Lita is going to prick the priest's pride. Does that sound right? By seducing him so he'd no longer be proud of his priestly celibacy and holiness and serving God and stuff. Only it doesn't quite work out that way. As the succubus comes onto Alvin, he scratches her in the forehead with his crucifix, which causes her to have a bit of a meltdown. He legs it to the Baron's church. The devil approaches him but cannot enter. Alvin makes a deal to sell his soul if his travelling companions will be spared. The devil agrees. Next morning, everyone, including Lita, is present at breakfast, all alive and well. Has this been nothing but a horrible dream? Alvin, the trainee priest, wonders. Hans and the Baron are fencing on the lawn, not putting up fences, but practicing fighting with swords. On guard, touche, have at thee, varlet, etc. Hans runs the Baron through. Whether this is on purpose or a tragic accident, I have no idea, but he soon lies dying in bed dead as a result. Alvin decides not to leave with his travelling companions, but to stay behind and minister to the soul of the dying Baron. As the tour bus lurches off, looking even more like a vehicle out of Trumpton or Chigley after a budget slash, the driver, Ducha, who is still fixated on slobbering over a greasy chicken leg, swerves to miss a horse and cart driven by the devil. Watched by Lita and Alvin from the terrace of the castle, the bus plunges into a ravine and explodes. Lita throws herself into Alvin's comforting arms. The devil smiles at her. She smiles back at him, and that's it. From succubus to fuckabus. When I first saw The Devil's Nightmare, I didn't much rate it. Young as I was, I picked up on certain disobliging elements. The dialogue was and remains criminally banal, disjointed, unfocused, and sometimes completely unrelated to what is happening on screen. It is then in the general spirit of what is up there on screen before us, which is poorly edited, jumpy, bumpy, and often out of context. If you fancy looking for some hidden meaning in the narrative, then don't let me stop you, and if you find any, let me know what it is. A lot of what you get is contrivance devised to lead events by the nose from one place to another. For instance, the Baron is an alchemist because that means he'll have a room full of gold dust. Nancy, the greedy money grubber, then has a room full of gold dust to drown in. Wouldn't it make more sense if the Baron, instead of being an alchemist, and considering he was a high-ranking Nazi, absconded with a shitload of stolen Nazi gold after the war, so he has a room full of bullion which could fall on and crush Nancy when she tries to remove some of it. But no, this is not a film that thinks that way, of what might make contextual sense in the framework of the story, because it has no interest in making sense of any kind or in any way. I found the deaths weren't easily connected to the 7 deadly sins. Gluttony is choking through gorging on food. Drowning in gold fits in with greed or avarice. How a guillotine or Iron Maiden pairs up with lust and envy, I'm not sure. Wrath doesn't equate with being thrown out of a turret window by a succubus. And Regine being killed by a snake whilst asleep isn't directly symptomatic of being slothful. Waking up and seeing the snake and not being asked to do anything to avoid it would be. But I guess if she hadn't been asleep, then the snake wouldn't have got to her in the first place. And does Corinne really envy Nancy? Getting it on with Howard, stealing him away from her doesn't take much effort. He's hardly a reluctant adulterer. The 7 deadly sins aspect is a plot device or thread that doesn't really work, because it hasn't been thought through, and that makes the narrative structurally messy, and to some extent infuriating. It leaves the viewer struggling to make those connections. Its case wasn't helped by the fact I approached it as a support feature for something I mistakenly imagined was going to be far superior, when the opposite was sadly true. The gore content is less than you'd find in a contemporaneous Hammer film. There's no overt horror, nothing to scare, unsettle or shock, unless you count the infant's murder. What there is, however, is a girl-on-girl sex scene, probably what earned it an X certificate from the BBFC. And of course the priceless presence of Erica Blanc. Any expectations of nudity and explicit carnal activity from her in the role of a promiscuous seductive succubus, the fire and forget soul-stealing sex toy of the devil, are purely justified, but are not going to be satisfied here. This is as close as it gets. She keeps her kit on. Disappointing, guys, and for some girls even, or others, but there it is. Yet she represents a potent and vital screen presence and dominates her scenes whether she's in standard lethal sex kitten or demon mode. She has a distinct visual magnetism that draws the eye, although all the women apart from Martha naturally have that heavily made up early 70s refined Dolly Bird aesthetic going on and are certainly pleasing to the eye. Erica Blanc stands out. Her arrival on screen is like a sudden celluloid detonation, and it makes an impact, or at least it did on me. The Devil's Nightmare is a curious and bizarre invention, a freewheeling gothic fantasy with some giallo sprinkles on top and Hammer-flavoured shavings to the side. It doesn't engage or excite on the same level as something from Hammer or Mario Bava or Dario Argento. It lacks that smart sense of black humour or unself-conscious drive to push boundaries and censor bait. The lesbian love scene is as close as it gets to sexploitation, but even back in the day it wasn't exactly explicit and was, to be honest, pretty tame. A revelation to my young eyes, but a lot of stuff was back then. It's got something though. The transformation of Erica Blanc's ravishing beauty into an ashen-faced demon is achieved with use of very simplistic but creative makeup application along with inventive camera work, and is pretty effective without being hysterically overstated. Most of the women look great. Yes, I know I'm a sexist pig for noticing, but in my defense, I don't fucking care. There is the atmosphere of a sleazy Euro trash fever dream pervading the proceedings. And the double twist at the end is a neat idea. Oh, it was all a dream. Devil reappears, bus crashes, everyone dies. Wasn't a dream after all. And Mr. Bean's grandfather owns the souls of 6 sinners and a trainee priest. Bonanza! And it was mostly filmed on location in and around a real castle in Belgium. Belgium has castles. When did that happen? Would I have been happier if I'd seen Disciple of Death first and then The Devil's Nightmare? I think so. I would probably have appreciated it more, rated it more favourably, after 70 minutes of Mike Raven lisping his arse off. As it was, I felt disappointed and cheated. Cheated out of 10 pence. Hey, it was a lot back then. It was. The Blu-ray version is supposedly uncut. The only difference, as far as I can tell, is the lesbian love-in lasts longer, and I'm not going to complain about that. And of course, it's a cleaner, brighter print, although the audio is still a bit crackly. Not to worry, you won't make any sense out of anything anyone says anyway. Mute it, and your understanding of what's going on will remain pretty much the same. Thanks for your time and attention. This has been a random unplanned distraction for me, and if no one watches it, I do understand. It's something I felt I needed to get out of my system, and into yours if you've looked in on it at all. Sorry, but there it is. Back soon with something I actually intended to do next. Oh yes.